That's my thoughts.
So
this
when,
week.
when that sample came out in the early 90s, that turned out to be from, it was misattributed to people from a whole nother continent, but it turned out that Deep Frost track was sampling
My people's,
your people's knowledge.
Mm.
In the copyright and the intellectual property and the Creative Commons argument about it being that they had the right to do it.
One of the biggest problems with copyright with Indigenous peoples is that if it is considered traditional or a folk tune, then it is not, or collectively owned, it is not
but my
under copyright.
friend Lou Q&A says that all music's folk music.
That's right, I agree. And I mean, I'm not suggesting that I don't think that this is problematic. I'm just saying what people keep saying to me.
So can we trace the sample audio?
Yep.
What its origin?
Yep.
And where it went. That would
Yep.
be interesting.
So it was a woman called Afunakwa, who is from the area of Baigu in North Malaita. So it's like right next door to where my mum grew up. And it's also where my family, I have relatives from that area as well, ancestors from that area. So it's a tune that was sung to my mum when she was a little girl by her grandmother. So this would have been in the 30s and that's the oldest knowledge of it that I have in my family. But she told me that when she was still alive. Awhinakwa was recorded by an ethnomusicologist called Hugo Zemp, who's very famous internationally as far as his work with Solomon Island and particularly Malaitan panpipers. He also he video recorded and then with panpipe groups in South Malaita, and then he did trips up into the north where we're from and did recordings. And so it was on one of these trips that he did a recording of Awhinakwa. And then he took that recording and then he made up a album called Whataleka and Baigu Music, and that recording is on that. Then it was that was a UNESCO album. It was in UNESCO archives, and Deep Forest say that they asked him for permission. He says that they did not. They asked for permission of an Ivory Coast piece of music for a live performance, not for the Solomon Island recordings. So there's this whole grey area where Deep Forest says one thing, Hugo Zemp says another thing, and UNESCO, who held the music in their archives, apparently there's someone from UNESCO okayed it. But that person is no longer there and no one can say yay or no. So Deep Forest still refuses to acknowledge it or to get into any kind of conversation around it. And a friend of mine, her name's Marit, she actually did a video recording in 2006. She went back to Awhinakwa's people and spoke specifically with them about that song. She spoke to UNESCO, she spoke to Hugo Zemp, and also another anthropologist who was really involved he wrote an article about copyright specifically to do with this lullaby, and also tried to speak with Deep Forest, and they weren't interested. So
what's the consensus there that Deep Forest doesn't have permission?
As far as our people go, they definitely don't have permission. They never acknowledged our people. And interestingly, I went online on YouTube. The original video recording that went with that track is of African people in the desert.
Yeah. Yeah.
And on the CD recording, it attributes Pygmy people to
who aren't from
the music, but also aren't Malaitan.
No.
Like, so they don't even have the right people attributed. And then
panpipes.
later on, they went and did a second official video recording, and that is more, it goes around the world. It's kind of like a bit more like
World music.
world music. That's right.
Isn't that your
So,
specialty?
I mean, from my perspective, it's, and from my people's perspective, ironically, the Deep Forest song has become the most played traditional song in the Solomons. Like, you can hear it everywhere across the Solomons today. But it's more that it's people being proud of it existing out in the world than it is about Deep Forest. If that makes sense.
So they've taken that back.
They've taken it back.
Awesome.
But it's also, if you get into discussions with my people about it, certainly, we use it as a case to protect ourselves.
I bet they're not paying royalties on each playing.
On
each playing of the tune. I bet.
Oh, no.
Of course not.
No. And of course, in the
somebody
Solomons,
else's
everyone
fault.
shares everything by Bluetooth. So it's just gone psh, across the Solomons,
Nice.
through all the mobile phones, which I think is hilarious and quite ironic.
It's funny.
Yeah.
And the New Zealand government, they're having submissions on copyright at the moment.
Ah.
And changing our act. Or what?
Feedback on objectives.
And so this is copyright for all copyright? Like, is it images? Is it music? Is it
I'll
film,
I'll
TV?
send it to you.
I'd be really interested.
Because it's quite a chunky.
Oh, I bet
kinda-
it is.
I know, and that's what really annoys me is that the accessibility
It's
to
not
those
transparent.
documents. Yeah, and there is a new bill, Marrakesh Treaty, a bill about giving people with disabilities access to copyright material, more accessible. I don't know what that means, but in terms of, does that mean they're able to?
Concerns me about
Strange.
copyright is the whole 50-year thing.
50 years on 50 years. Yeah.
And particularly when it comes to Indigenous music, Indigenous art,
Yeah.
it's like that's, to me, it makes no sense that someone else can own something that has been owned for eons.
There were two objectives that sort of like counter, that threw against each other, because one was keeping access open and obligations under the Treaty of Waitangi, there we go. And then Objective D down there, maintaining our international obligations. So for me, it's just like,
What does that even mean?
Oh, it's sounding suspiciously like we're
TPP.
Like a
revisiting the
big hole in
TPPA.
the copyright laws
Yeah.
so we
Yes.
can do whatever we want.
Well, if it doesn't suit the American military and economic machine, then it doesn't suit anybody else, right?
but my shtick is that having access to the material in the archives, wherever
Well, that's
they
a
be.
big problem in New Zealand already. I mean,
Yeah.
how many things have you had problems trying to get hold of to do your research
Yes.
about your people
Yes,
by New Zealand establishment?
yes. I get treated differently depending on where I go and who I ask
Yep.
the question.
And some,
And it's really difficult for me to even... I've just been writing about this too.
oh, good, good, good.
Yeah, about access.
And access is huge. I mean, that's another issue that we had with the whole museum
Yeah.
idea, right, as
Yeah.
well, is that who is able to access our knowledge? Are our people able to access our knowledge?
Yeah.
So there's this reluctance to have to produce evidence that you have the right to that access, but yet we would expect that anyway. I mean, one of the first things we ask somebody when we meet them is, where are you from?
Yes.
Who are you?
Always.
Who the hell are you?
Yep.
What are you doing here?
And I think particularly for our peoples, where are you from is purposeful.
Of course it is.
It is a way of
Are we related?
showing connection. That's
Yeah.
right. Figuring out connection.
But that whole gatekeeper and attitudes towards that gatekeeping people use the word take ownership of it rather than kaitia.
Yeah. Real different thing, eh?
And that's a whole big problem because it's mine.
Again, it comes down
It's
to
fine.
definitions and understandings.
Yeah. And it can be... I think I'm understanding the role of museum and archives as a time capsule of that time.
Nice
Because
way of putting it.
Yeah, because you can't add to the story there. There's no mechanisms to add apart from curators who are there, but yet again their histories or their knowledge isn't kept.
No.
So you
Absolutely.
might have someone very knowledgeable about this piece.
I mean,
and
that's,
they
that's
leave.
pretty
Where's
much the
their story?
problem.
Yeah.
You know, like I'm looking back at all these people that have either deposited items or in particular museums, and the records will show that so-and-so deposited it and that person worked there for 40 years, and they probably had masses of knowledge about that particular piece, but it's not stored.
So I had... I was in the Hocken the other day and I was looking at this really cool collection. Katrina Spates, who was in 1962 judged the Miss Universe pageant here in Dunedin, and she kept her judging sheet and some cutouts of newspaper articles, and that's why I had posted one of her criteria was the texture of flesh.
Oh, yeah.
How well your texture of flesh was.
Wow.
And your I know. But I think that was just so. And your
you glowing?
measurements,
Blotchy.
how your proportions are.
Which the ideal then would have been quite different from
Yes,
today.
yes.
Like they didn't have toned arms back then.
No. Yes, well, the texture of
They were
flesh or whether they
gym
do.
Yeah.
But in that box, it didn't make sense. So she had clippings in the book. And I was like, well, they don't match up because the book she's got wasn't of the night. I found out that it wasn't the night that she judged. She was judging the semi-finals, and she had like the finals there and some newspaper clippings. And it wasn't until I went back to Dunedin's Evening Star that had the full information on it of that. But there's no way to add to that collective item. It's really difficult to add. I can add my information over here, maybe.
Yeah.
But you can't continue on
Isn't
a
that
And that's
story.
kind
It's
of,
really-
that's interesting because I think that that's what we're talking about with Indigenous knowledge as well,
Yeah.
right? And this is something that I've written about in my work as well, is the idea that collective knowledge is building upon and adding to. And not one person has all the knowledge. Therefore, if we were to all come together collectively, that's the true knowledge.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't think I'm coming to a conclusion that's not the role of archives.
No, it's not.
No.
But again, it's from a different point of view and different understanding, right?
It's there for researchers to make those connections.
I know, but it's really...
But also it's at face value.
Yeah. And you have all these boxes of people's memories around, and it's such a shame that that no one knows they're there.
You do.
I do, but
But now
What's
some
the
more
point?
people.
Let us be